Welcome back to the Matter of Facts podcast on the Prepper Broadcasting Network. We talk prepping, guns, and politics every week on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Go check out our content at mwfpodcast.com on Facebook or Instagram. You can support us via Patreon or by checking out our affiliate partners. I'm your host, Phil Rabalais. Andrew and Nick are on the other side of the mic, and here's your show. So, welcome back to Matter of Facts podcast. I'm Phil. Nick's here. Trek is here in the guest seat, and Andrew was not implicated in the U.S. aid scandal, contrary to what our comment section is saying. He did call me super excited a couple of days ago and told me something about the Epstein client list, and I haven't heard from him since.
He's gone. He's gone.
So, I don't know.
Condolences.
I mean, I've called him a few times because I'm curious who this guy Epstein is, who he keeps ranting and raving about like a lunatic, but he hasn't called me back. So, you know, Andrew, if you're out there, like, say hi to your boy. What's going on?
Blink twice if you're under duress.
I did warn him when he told me he had to kind of take a step back from the show to deal with some family stuff and some personal things. I did warn him that we were going to be putting him on the hot spot. Like every week was going to be a new excuse for why Andrew wasn't here. I think the last time we said the Ukrainians abducted him and were ransoming him.
Yeah, got voluntold to the Ukrainian front line.
That's right.
New jeans and 2 goats, and we'll get him back.
There you go.
So, Trek, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
To catch everybody up, I don't want to say you're not involved with MDFI anymore because I kind of feel like MDFI is your baby, but you've taken a step back, and I understand that you've engaged in a new line of work, which you may or may not want to discuss on the show. I'm looking for like. I'm just looking for an indication, like Phil, wave off, stop.
No, it's perfectly okay. In fact, I think we'll have to skirt some of the particulars tonight, but it's certainly part of the topic of the show. Yeah, still very proud to be part of MDFI. Also, even prouder to no longer be the owner, and I say that with all respect because I'm so proud that my guys, Tim, Brandon, and Derek, have taken over ownership of MDFI. They just had their second sold-out class. I mean, that's the first 2 classes both sold out. Season's looking good. I've got my first class as instructor on 5 April, and it's a when a gun's not an option class, and it's like 3 spots from being sold out, which is absolutely huge. I'm looking forward to taking on the use of force instruction for the company, and the guys are going to be handling the live fire instruction, which is great because the current tempo that I've got, I'm actually not supposed to be home right now, but I was sent home from my current gig, one to avoid the ice storm that just hit South Michigan, but I might be gone on another adventure starting next week. So I had to come back, unpack, repack, square away gear, and I'll be probably off to somewhere, hopefully not without fire this time.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someday you're going to have to explain to me how your luck works, that you go from wildfires to blizzard. And hopefully next time you're going to, like, I don't know, a temperate beach, maybe some umbrella drinks, like something pleasant.
That would be nice. Probably not. You know, the funny part is, as we get into the story, I have been told that I could have stopped everything that happened on 7 January if I had just held a You Suck, It's Not the Gun class in California. The skies would have opened up. It would have been a monsoon. And all would have been taken care of. I didn't even think about it at the time. I should have. I could have saved the world.
I was about to say this sounds very reminiscent of the joke we used to tell each other in the army about how, like, just once could we go like depose a dictator in a nice temperate climate where the weather's nice and pretty and, you know, there's like hula girls on a beach or something. No, they have to send us to deserts, mountainous deserts, and jungle hellholes. That's everywhere you get to go when you enlist in the Army or the Marines. I don't know where the Air Force or the Navy goes, but I know that if you're in the Army, the Marines, you universally get screwed.
Well, wherever you go to the Air Force, there will be a golf course. I mean, that's...
Oh, yeah.
See, but I have to disagree with you because I was on a joint Army Air Force base and there was no golf course.
He just didn't tell you where it was, but I guarantee you there was one.
Those
Pretty sure. I mean, when my buddy was sent over to Kuwait to watch people collect garbage for 6 months, there was a golf course next to the Air Force base.
That's how they just don't put the fence around it, and they
play once a week.
It's still their golf course.
Mm-hmm.
You know, honestly, with all the mortars they were shooting at us, they probably could just use the holes for friggin', you know,
there you go,
for the golf course, and The whole place is a sand trap, though. Anyway,
Yeah.
so the title of the episode is The Roof, the Roof, the Roof is on Fire, because I am a child of the 80s and 90s, and y'all have to freaking deal with it occasionally. But Trek, you had some excitement a couple of weeks ago, right about the time Nick and I were actually in this studio talking about the wildfires in California. And at the time, I kind of tried to make some analogies to something that, like, we deal with here, which is floods. And the only parallel there, even though it doesn't seem like there be one, is, a flood is one of those few events that there is no bug-in option. Your shelter is screwed. You cannot stay in your home if you're about to get whacked with like 12 feet of flood water. You have to leave. Bug in is no longer an option. Bug out is the only option. You have to go. And that's kind of from the perspective I look at wildfires. It's staying here is not an option for obvious reasons. I hope they're obvious. So we have to pack up and go. But like, I've never been as close to a wildfire as I think you were recently. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective, like, unpack this topic for us, because if you want to ask me about hurricanes, I can sit here and talk your ear off for 6 hours. Wildfires are not in my bag.
Yeah, as a Michigander, they're not in my bag, but they became my bag pretty quick and pretty impromptu. And it's kind of funny with the name of the show, the roof is on fire. They did need some water, but they didn't have it, and they let that mother effer burn. As it, it's starting to come out about the Palisades Reservoir and things like that. But yeah, I was out in Pacific Palisades, specifically where we're coming live from Pacific Palisades as everything's on fire. I was exactly in downtown Pacific Palisades for quite a few days leading up to January 7th. I was out there on an executive protection detail, and I went to. I had a partner out there. We worked depending on what was going on. Sometimes it was a quiet day. Got to do some escorts down in Hollywood. That is not a nice place to be. Beverly Hills. No. Okay, I saw it once. That's all I need to see. But this particular day, it was an early morning, and I always made it a point that when I was just hanging out in the vehicle, I would have the West Division LAPD listening to the scanner traffic just to see what's going on. We use some other real-time intelligence apps that people can get, and they're really handy. Citizen app is a great one. If you've never seen that, it kind of puts a 2.5 mile bubble radar around your GPS location, and when something happens at the moment, we'll get an alert. For example, there was an assault in Pacific Palisades one of the days where 3 kids, as in like young 20s, were riding by on e-bikes. They committed an assault. It was a very simple assault, but as the alert was going off on the app, I had the 3 assailants roll right by my vehicle. So it happened that fast. It's kind of neat. So, but this particular morning, we had an intelligence briefing. It's called Watching the News. It just sounds fancy to say intelligence briefing, but our operations center sent us the word 48 hours before that the Santa Ana winds were expected to hit, and just be ready for 80 plus mile an hour winds, which to me seemed very wild to say 80 mile an hour winds. I was stationed at Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, where every day 15 to 20 mile an hour winds is normal. I don't think I ever was out there for a day when there wasn't winds. And then when you get 50 mile an hour winds, that seemed kind of crazy. So when we heard 80 plus mile an hour winds, seemed pretty wild. But this one particular morning, I left the Airbnb that we were staying at, had my all my gear, and I had to walk over 450 yards down the street because the Airbnb driveway wasn't big enough to handle the SUV that I was driving without parking and blocking the sidewalk. So I had to park way down the street and hump all my gear. It was very windy, and I remember the trees were whipping quite a bit that day. Nothing other than a Michigan windy day. But when I got down to actual Pacific Palisades proper, the most interesting thing was the palm trees, which are very prevalent down in that area. They were shedding their dried branches, and they were crashing to the ground and almost hitting people that were walking by, to the point that they were starting to obscure the sidewalks. They were starting to clog up the roads, and the palm trees were really whipping around. And it was one of those, well, that sucks. Don't park underneath a palm tree was kind of all that was going through my head. And I want to say it was about 10:30 local time out there, 10:30 in the morning, when I heard a patrolman in LAPD West Division called for an air unit to verify a possible structure fire up in the hills. And they got one of the LAPD sheriff's office birds up there in that wind, and the pilot, and then this is very important. This is what I heard live on the radio. I know there's been lots of reports of where the fires may have started, but this is the particular call that I heard. The LA sheriff's office helicopter verified that one of the homes up on top of if you look at a map of Pacific Palisades, you can see the windy roads that go up into the mountains. And then on the other side, I believe, is North Hollywood. And that's on the other side of the mountain range where the Hollywood sign is at and things like that. And he confirmed it was a house fire. So, okay, gee whiz, bits of information. I looked up toward that direction and you could see a little wisp of smoke. It was nothing, white smoke, brush fire. It didn't look black smoke, did not look like a structure fire. But I saw a little bit of white smoke. The wind that day was blowing out to sea, which was good. The fire was northwest of us. The wind was blowing pretty much due east. Okay, it's a fire. It's not going to, no big concern whatsoever. My partner finally, we were working a staggered shift. He showed up and I was like, hey, I'm going to get some breakfast. I've been here for a while and I need to head back to the Airbnb just to take a quick break, grab some stuff. Drove towards the fire, yet very far away, 4 miles back to the Airbnb from Pacific Palisades downtown. And the fire, you could see the little wisp of smoke up there, no big deal. I got to the Airbnb. These houses, for the people that don't know, I want to say the Airbnb that we were staying at was valued at $6 million. It doesn't look like it. When I say that, it looked like it was a very small 2-bedroom, had 1 floor, had a little patio with an outdoor washer and dryer, kitchen, full bathroom, 2 bedrooms and a living room. And it was, I believe, valued about $6 million, and it was packed. The landlord's house was above and immediately behind, and there were houses like you could reach out and kind of pat the side of the house that was next to you. And I got up there and had to use the restroom. And this is always funny. I joke. I had this delicious breakfast burrito from a place called Gracias Senors. This kid makes the best burritos in the world. Luckily, his truck had wheels, so he left. So I'm happy to report that he's probably still making burritos to this day. Used the restroom and got out into the kitchen, took 1 bite out of the delicious breakfast burrito, and I got a call from my partner saying, hey, we've got a report of another fire that is within 2 miles of the client residence. I need you to go check it out. I begrudgingly wrapped my burrito back up after taking 1 delicious bite, shoved it in the fridge, grabbed my go bag that I have with me wherever I go, and I was out the door, locked things up. I drove the 4 miles back, normal traffic, nothing was crazy, back into Pacific Palisades, went to the address of the fire. It was the fire department. I don't know why somebody called in, if it was a miscommunication, but the address that I was given wasn't a fire. It was an actual fire station there in Pacific Palisades. So I called our operations center and say, hey, it's a false alarm. Don't worry about it. I'm heading back to the Airbnb because I wanted to continue my break. And when I turned to face the mountains again, half an hour had passed. The world had changed. The whole mountaintop was now black, white smoke. And it was not a little wisp coming off of one location. It was taking up a massive amount of space. And I immediately got on the phone with my partner and I said, we've got a situation going on. That fire is huge. I said, I'm getting up. There was a 3-story parking garage in CVS in downtown Pacific Palisades. And I said, I'm heading up there. So I parked, ran up. I didn't want to deal with the parking structure. So I ran up the 3 stories, got there, and I posted on social media some of the pictures that I took. And that was the mountaintop is now on fire. And this is very interesting. And there's lots of things I'm sure I'm missing, and we can talk about it. But when we talk situational awareness, I'll go more in depth about things that I noticed the days leading up to it, about the people that lived there versus what I was seeing the day of the fire. And the first thing that I'll point out is I was coming down from the roof of the CVS, and my partner saying, you need to get back here now. We need to basically get to the client's residence. We're going to be making a very important decision here. What I noticed coming off of the roof was the average Pacific Palisades resident that normally they were very aloof. Imagine people just like ice cream cones. Like no one wears blue jeans. They wear really expensive sweatpants or spandex everything. They've got coffee cup in one hand, headphones on, or they are looking at a electronic device. I mean, that is exactly what it is. The condition white, 100% when you see people in that area. What I noticed though was the soccer moms that normally had their phones down in a coffee cup. They had their phones up to their head. They were looking around, and I noticed that the lackadaisical pace of just kind of meandering to and from was kind of that speed walk. Like, I'm not nervous, you're nervous, but I'm going to act like I'm not nervous, and I'm going to walk really fast to get back to my car. And I started looking around, and I saw lots of people glancing up at the sky, talking into their phones, and they were kind of like, they were doing the fast walk. I'm not going to run, but there's a purpose now to my movement. Up to that point, drove to the client's residence. I was immediately, we went from it's a bright sunshiny day to evacuation, and we were gone. I was on the Pacific Coast Highway and about 45 seconds after arriving at the client's residence, I boogied south to Santa Monica, and then we did some further things to evacuate even further. Right. But that's how fast it happened. 2 hours later from that point, we have 2 to 3 hours later, we have footage from security cameras at the client's residence that the fire was overtaking the neighborhood.
Wow.
It came into that area so fast. And I don't need to describe it. It was all over the news. I had just enough time to message my wife saying, evacuating from fire. I'm safe. And then I got the chance to tell her with one word, safe, later on once we had taken care of things. But for the next 72 hours, it was pretty crazy. I lost about 75% of my clothes, some equipment. Our Airbnb burned to the ground. I have 3 air tags that they have their last moment of breath still saved on my phone when they pinged. But yeah, that was the Pacific Palisades, and it was a very interesting. There was a lot of lessons learned. That was what happened the day of, but there were a lot of things that I was very happy with. What I did personally, what we did as an security detail. Executive protection sounds fancy. What we did as a security detail, there were great lessons learned. Being a Michigander, not being from California. A lot of the stuff about how stupid California is true. We can go into that. Other people, I mean, I met some very nice people, but like the laws, the policies, the things like that make us and I'm in Michigan, which is not the freest state, but it's sure as hell is freer than California, and things at least make a little bit more sense. But a lot of very, very interesting lessons from that day. I'm very happy to report that we did our job. In fact, I have this. I'm going to cover up the company I work for logo, but this is right here on my desk. Residence key, which is no longer there. Our client's residence, sadly, is no longer there. And then 7 January 2025, we did our job, Pacific Palisades. Yeah, I'm very happy to report. No, I mean, there were casualties, horrible, that there was a loss of life as far as our thing went. No injuries, no casualties, just property. Property can be replaced. It is what it is. And I got back to Michigan about a week later. So yeah, that was my January 7th. Anyway.
So just so I can kind of like frame this up, because from the time you saw the first wisp of smoke, which when you started into this conversation about 15 minutes ago, you indicated that like initially you weren't super concerned about the wildfire. Like you were aware of it, you were maintaining situational awareness, but it wasn't an immediate threat. From that moment to, oh crap, get your butt over here, we're about to, flip this thing upside down and tuck and roll. What's that time span? Was that 3-4 hours or?
No, from the initial call, I remember calling in to our operations center. Hey, there is a LAPD bird. It is confirming a structure fire on in fact, if you had the Citizen app, you could probably go to January 7th and you could see the initial icon that kind of appeared up on the mountain. I looked at the app. I pulled up Google Maps. I located where it was. National Weather Service wind direction. Yeah, this is not even contemplating what we found out, that there were no pre-staged fire assets on a day that it had been broadcast 48 plus hours that these were going to be horrible winds. They have an electrical grid that, branches fall. The eucalyptus trees, which is a whole funny thing we can talk about, which are highly flammable and everywhere.
They're worse than pine trees.
They are there. It's a very interesting story about that. But I figured there's going to be a fire response. You could hear West Division calling in that fire was responding. Here's a joke. If you're LAPD, don't take it personally. In a lot of other states, police make fun of firefighters. In LA, the firefighters make fun of the cops. If you're LA Fire, you're a stud. I mean,
no, maybe not now.
They are. Well, they are, and we'll talk about it. They are. I mean, they did what they could with set up for failure. I mean, they rocked it, right? And we can talk about that. So I was not concerned simply by, I knew it was going to burn, and that sucks.
Right.
But I figured, if anything, it would be the smoke. When I showed up, actually, when I got into theater is the wrong word. When I got into California, theater. When I got deployed to California,
it's a theater, all right.
It's a theater. There was already wildfires. The smoke was, when I got out of LAX, the air already smelled like wildfires. So my biggest concern at the time was maybe the air is going to become nasty and unbreathable, and we might need to meander somewhere else, which is not a big deal. So I figured, okay, it's going to burn. It's going to burn towards the ocean. We're a good distance away. Nothing could have. My brain didn't fathom the fact that it could move against what I thought was the wind direction, because it was pretty much going due east, and we were considerably south. But I just didn't think that it would happen that fast. But it was, I want to say, it was about an hour and a half from the initial call of fire to the I'm on top of the CVS roof, and then a couple hours later, Pacific Palisades is a fireball. So it happened very, very fast, very fast.
So really, we're talking a timeline of like 90 to 280 minutes.
Yeah, I believe they said, and this is, I'm not an expert, but I believe they were saying that at the first night of the fires in Pacific Palisades, it was covering 200 yards a second.
Wow.
Oh. So
that is
engulfing. It was engulfing 200 yards a second. And I believe it. When you, the interesting thing that, and this, I've been working on the evacuation plan for days before this, not for a wildfire, just for anything, primary, secondary, and tertiary evacuations of the clients. And it paid off in dividends. The research that I'd done was not tailored for what happened, but because I had done the groundwork beforehand, it made the day of a lot. And that's kind of that prior, the prior work always pays off in dividends. But it was amazing how these places that are so expensive, and if you look up the property value of I believe, I want to be very careful. Imagine a rental home that's over $50,000 a month. That's the kind of homes that if you rent a home in this area, that's what they're going for. They're very expensive, very nice homes. But a lot of the homes have a backyard that is the size of a postage stamp, and they're worth more than my 13 acres. I can't even.
By multiple times, I would imagine.
Right, and to me, the land is the value, but that little place there has got so much value because of where it is in California and the area around it. The challenge for that area is very thick vegetation and gates everywhere. There is no backyard. There's no yards that are open. They're all walled in with gates and fences. And then a lot of times, because you're so close to the neighbors, they've used vegetation, incredible bamboo or hedgerows to make it so you can't hand the beer from your kitchen window to your neighbor's kitchen window and their house is worth $90 million. So you have this false, we're private. No, you're not private. You're right on top of people. But that
Sure.
vegetation caused it, it helped to fuel the fire as it burned. I guess
Now,
getting into politics, there was a lot of dried and dead brush that had not been cleared in many years that also went to it. So
yeah, there was a lot of reports of deferred maintenance on power lines, a lot of reports of deferred maintenance on brushy areas, tree areas. But honestly, I don't think that much mattered in this case. Sure, yes, it contributed to it, but with how close you're stating these houses are stacked together, like you could reach out and hand your neighbor a beer window to window. Great. All right. I don't know how long your wingspan is, Trek. You're about my height, like 6', 6'2", something like that.
mhm.
I'm guessing you could probably, with your neighbor, maybe reach across if you lean out the window about 4 or 5 feet
Yeah,
safely with a beer.
yeah, and a lot of people when they hear Pacific Palisades, they think the
Yeah,
all
ritzy
the
up in the mountains
all the
houses.
rich people. Well, Pacific Palisades is Gucci. Downtown Pacific, I mean, and around there is the very expensive homes, like
Mhm.
very ostentatious homes. And then as you head down Sunset Boulevard, I mean, right down from Pacific Palisades is that this is Beverly Hills.
Right.
And then past that is Hollywood, West Hollywood. Um, those homes, they're very close.
Sure.
Maybe I'm kind of joshing a little bit. Like there might be enough room between your house to walk and then a fence, and then the neighbor
Right.
can walk a walkway and then their side of their house. But when you go to where we were staying in Pacific Palisades, not the ritzy part, we were in Airbnb. No joke, those places are packed in like sardines because the land value is so expensive. They use
Sure.
every little bit that they have. So yeah, that I am not being facetious when I say that you are handing a beverage out of your window to another home.
So, at that point, then I guess it doesn't really matter what you have or what you do on your property as far as brush clearance or fire break maintenance. Any fire that's in any structure there is highly likely to spread to another because you are so close.
Yeah, it was definitely a factor of wood construction houses right up on top
Mhm.
of each other. There was a story, and it was in Pacific Palisades. I know that there were houses in the client's neighborhood that they're still standing, and when you look at
Right.
them versus what the other homes look like, you're like, oh, I know why it's still standing because it's not made out of wood. It
Cement
was
brick houses and stuff
it
like
was made
that.
out of very fire retardant material. There
Hmm.
was a story that I did hear after we took the initial evacuation and got to meet other evacuees from the area, and they were saying that there was a gentleman in one of those neighborhoods that fought the city for years to build his house out of fire retardant things, but they fought because it doesn't keep with the aesthetic of the neighborhood. His house is
Sure.
the only one standing in that entire
And
neighborhood, and it doesn't
that
even look
fight
like
has
there was
paid
a fire.
off.
And
Exactly.
the city will probably still try to bankrupt him, even though he's got the only
Oh,
house left on the block.
absolutely.
Well, it's one of those, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Your house still stands, and now the infrastructure,
Is
do you
gone.
have a generator? Do you have solar? Do you have water purification? I did post on social media after the fire, there was a public health notice. This is very interesting. It said to all residents of that area, do not drink the water and
Hmm.
do not drink it even if you treat it. And
Interesting.
I posted that because what is in the water if I can't treat it, if I can't boil it, if I can't filter it, and you're telling me it's still dangerous? That's some terrifying stuff. But when you go back and watch the first night and the firefighters are calling in, the news reporters are calling explosions, sounds like they're all the Teslas exploding. And now
Oh, yeah, heavy
So
metal
the work,
poisoning in the
yeah,
water supply.
and
Sure,
it
sure.
was very interesting. Just as an aside, I think Teslas are cool. I got to drive. I got to drive one. Part of the detail
Mhm.
we had one as part of our vehicles. It's like driving a TIE fighter. It
Right.
was pretty incredible. But that being said, the uh, the ratio of EVs to what we see here, and I'm not sure, Phil, for you, it's like every now and then, oh look, a Cybertruck. Oh
Yeah.
look, there's a Tesla. There, it's like, oh look, there's a regular vehicle. It was easily in Pacific Palisades, 3 to 4 out of every 10 vehicles was a Tesla. Easily. And
they're going to be dealing with heavy metal contaminants in that groundwater supply and just in the ground itself then for decades.
Yeah,
it doesn't go anywhere.
No, and they've got a lot of problems with the vehicles that are burnt up, and I believe they've been specially marking the electric vehicles like EV
continuing to catch fire.
Because I mean, inside that charred hulk is lithium, and who knows? So I love the idea. Elon Musk to me is a genius. Love what he's doing. I like the idea of electric vehicle. I have problems with the preparedness side and what happens if the grid goes down. But that's a big issue to me. Is your vehicle is a bomb and a fire, and of course I'm not talking like a high yield explosion, but they definitely were popping off, and now you have firefighters that can't get near things because their doctrine says you got to let this sucker burn. You cannot get near it. So yeah, that was a very interesting just side note from. It's a very, very sunny place. They're really big into green energy. That's a topic for another day. But the vehicles, especially if you saw the video of the Highway of Death, and I only call it that based on the old Iraq Gulf War I, where they abandoned all the vehicles. That was Sunset Boulevard. Those pictures was Sunset Boulevard heading from Pacific Palisades into Beverly Hills and the windy road. Those people that waited longer past us, they ended up having to run from their vehicles because the fire was moving in. And a lot of those were electric vehicles. So now you have, one vehicle goes and it's just going to keep setting off a chain reaction of vehicles. Most people think gas cars explode. They'll just catch fire.
They just burn like a candle for the most part.
They just burn like a candle, and that's it.
No, I mean, I saw pictures and video coming out of Pacific Palisades of like when the fire was close enough that like you could see it on the horizon, but people weren't like really freaking out yet. But there were just lines and lines of people lined up for charging stations because their only vehicles were electric and they were trying to evacuate. And before they could evacuate, they had to find a charging station. And it was like lines all the way through a parking lot, out onto the main road and down the road. People just stacked up waiting. And like, you could make the argument that the same thing happens down here around hurricanes. Cause like everybody knows before a hurricane comes on land, gas stations turn into parking lots around here, but there's still a much less lopsided ratio of gas stations to vehicles than there are charging stations to EVs.
Well, and the time difference to refuel an EV versus refuel a gas car, assuming there's enough fuel or electricity to top off your car, you're talking a difference of 45 minutes to several hours versus 5 minutes per vehicle.
The other thing that makes me wonder about is I know after a couple of hurricanes where we've had large power outages, there's been an effort to bring in large 12, 15K generators and hook these things up to the local gas stations so that they could purge the tanks and pump the fuel out that was still in them. And I feel like you can get away with that with a decent sized generator because all you have to do is run the pumps. But I don't think that scales very well if you're talking about running a bunch of electric vehicle chargers.
No, the amount of juice those things take, I'm not an expert on it, but just judging by when we would pull up to, and in California, I'll give it, they've got the chargers. I mean, they are everywhere. And Teslas are neat. They'll tell you exactly where they calculate everything. But even the supercharger for us, hard, fast rule is our vehicles don't get below half ever. Half is zero. And this paid off. I mean, once again, it paid off in our evacuation because I could have left the state with the fuel that I had in my vehicle, and I was not fully topped off because of a rule. If I get to half, it's immediate to a gas station to top the car back off. And we would do the same thing with a Tesla. But even then, and the Teslas have an interesting thing where 80% is generally what you want to. You can go up to 100, but for battery maintenance. So even just to go from 50-ish, 55 to 80 was 15, 20 minutes. Now, cool. The neat thing is the Tesla's got a TV screen, so you can sit there and you can watch a show. But I remember charging it up, and it's like, man, this is taking forever. My excursion, for God's sakes, I get mad. It's 44 gallons. I get pissed just trying to fill that thing up, and this takes far longer. So that's a great point. And preparedness stuff aside, there's a reason why my diesel truck has a 50-gallon auxiliary tank on it. I have a pump. I can literally, and when I mounted it, the handle has enough hose to reach my fuel intake. So I can fuel up my tractor with it, but I can also reach back and I can top off my truck. And my Excursion, I've got 10 gallons and 2 jerry cans mounted, because if I pulled up to a gas station and see a line, gas or electric, around the block, oh, let me just pull over and I'll put my, let's give an Excursion awful gas mileage. It's like 13, but let's say 10. I have 100 miles
right
in my car that's not attached to the gas tank. So if I go by my rule of 50% of the tank, I still have 10 more gallons on top of that. That is over 30 gallons of gas if I live by that rule. And with the Excursion, even though she's a gas guzzler, I can get a pretty good distance away from what's going on. So yeah, that's a very interesting thing. And I didn't see it. We were kind of like, see ya. I mean, it was we evacuated before most people did, because we saw the writing on the wall. But I can only imagine what it was like when the normal baseline of human beings was like, it's time to go. I cannot imagine what gas pumps were like, or the electric charging stations were like. It had to have been absolute chaos. And you can't just take like I got a 12-volt car battery, let me juice up my car. It would drain all that in 10 seconds and get you 50 feet of movement down the road. It needs a lot of juice.
Well, I know when my my wife's uncle bought one of those F-150 Lightnings with the extended range battery, and he was telling me that they had one of the, not a supercharger, but I think it's called a stage 2 charger. It's a 440 volt or a 220 volt charger in the house. It's a main line off the grid, and it takes 6 hours to top off his truck overnight.
And if
it's
memory serves
from
me,
flat to full. Now, granted, you don't let it go flat, but flat to full is 6 hours.
Yeah, the first guy who bought the Humvee, the first electric Humvee, he wrote a hell of a write-up because he got it home. He was so excited, and it 5 days to charge his Humvee. Hey, the asteroid's coming. Well, 5 days, and I can make it out of here. Like,
best of luck.
To me, that is the Desert Eagle of the concealed carry world. It's cool. Don't get me wrong, but you ain't packing that thing around. It's like, that Humvee is cool.
Yeah.
Well, what does it do? Like, what are you going to do with it? Unless that thing's fully charged, you are screwed.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, before we move on, like, thinking about power requirements, if memory serves me right, most of those big charging stations, I mean, they're 220 volts AC, and I think most of them run off of 50 amp.
Correct.
So, like, that's the same.
We looked at having one of the cargo vans put in at work, and it was 50 amp 220 was, I believe, the requirement.
That's basically the same power requirement as like the HVAC system in my house, which
that's
is
the same. That's the same power requirement as a 20 by 40 table CNC Cat 40 taper. Yeah.
So the point remains, we're talking about enough power to scare a lightning bolt. And it takes 15 to 20 minutes to top your vehicle off so that you can run from the fire that is moving at 200 yards a second.
Yeah,
or was it 200 feet? It doesn't really matter. It's coming.
I think it was 200 yards. Yeah.
Just as before we move on from the EVs, like I said, I love it. I've got a UBCO 2-wheel drive motorcycle, electric, goes 50-mile range, goes over everything. Or nods. I can sneak up. Like, it's pretty cool. But that's a toy. I'll take my gas-powered dirt bike if I need power and I need to get somewhere quick, and I can fuel up wherever I go. But if you took the flip side of what happened in Pacific Palisades last year, Justin Nazaroff at Phoenix Ammunition was posting pictures of the EVs on the side of the road during the blizzard, because on the flip side, they just shut down because of the cold temperatures. So that's where I'm at with the EV stuff. Just like windmills, a windmill at a house in your yard giving you some off-grid power is cool. The windmills we're putting in the fields and saying they're green, they're not green. So as an end user, electric is cool, but at the same time, it's not there yet as far as it prepared. The preparedness mindset.
As a daily commuter, they have their place.
Absolutely.
You have a fixed distance you're going every day, and you're going to recharge it every night when you get home.
Yeah, and I won't name the company. My sister works for a very large company out in Colorado, and there's charging stations for free for the employee cars. So she's timed it. She has a home charging station. She never charges at home. She gets to work, she plugs in, she just keeps commuting, and then she charges at the office. I mean, that's ingenious, but Okay, so now you have to evacuate Denver, Colorado. You can't go into California direction because of wildfires. You got to go now into South Dakota, and it's like, where's your charging station? Well, we got one. It's in Sioux Falls, and there's 5 other EVs, and they're going to be there for the next 5 hours. So, like, to me, you're very limited on where you can go because you might not have the infrastructure to back you up.
Absolutely.
I think the only people in the preparedness mindset I've ever met that own an EV, it's a second vehicle, or like you said, it's a commuter. It is an appliance to get me from my home to my work and back, but they have something else in the garage that burns dino juice and makes emissions and does all those things because it's reliable.
Yeah, no, I think that's there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I think it bit a lot of people in Pacific Palisades in the butt. And plus, when you get into storage, there were people. I don't know if you saw the videos of people trying to pack things in the little electric vehicles. Like there just wasn't much room to.
Well, at that point, you're not going to be doing much packing. I mean, realistically, if you've got to evacuate from a fire within a number of hours, you're grabbing clothes, you're grabbing maybe some food, and you are maybe grabbing any liquid capital assets you have on hand.
And you're assuming they have a couple hours because the impression I've gotten so far listening to Trek is that like he and his group, because of the training, because of their mindset, because of all the preparations,
luck of location.
Yeah, they were probably at the tip of the spear as far as being able to evacuate because they were switched on enough to realize this is bad. We need to get it. We don't need to be here right now. It's time to go. Yeah, and I imagine you were out probably an hour to an hour and a half before the rest of the meerkats on the prairie all stood up and looked around like, what's going? Why is it so hot? What's with all the smoke? Like. At that point, Nick, you could literally have 15. You could literally see fire at the end of your street.
Oh,
and have 5 minutes or less to get out.
Oh, absolutely. I'm saying in Trek's position, in what was actually a fairly fortunate position, in all things considered, they had multiple hours to make the assessment and leave. And even at that point, I'm not packing random possessions. I'm getting the hell away.
Yeah, and there were a lot of people. There were a lot of people that, and it's not, you can only beat up on the California government so much. Clearly, they were.
Well, I don't think we have quite enough yet.
Yeah, I know, and I saw an independent journalist that was doing the report about the Pacific Palisades Reservoir, and I Googled it. I ran by. I was doing my runs after duty up. I know I say run when you run up that hill. It's kind of like a jog. And then on the way down, it's like
it's a steep hill.
But I was running by this reservoir, unbeknownst to me, and it was over 10 million gallons. It was bone dry because the cover needed to be repaired. Because if birds poop in the water, we can't hold on to the water, even though fire season's coming up. And so, a lot of people though, because of government, I would say there was no siren to the best of my knowledge. Like
Interesting.
So there was people that got calls from their neighbors and like, hey, you need to go. And they're like, we're having dinner. What are you talking about? They're like, look outside your house. And Larry's house is on fire. And they're like, what the hell? And then you saw those people that were literally driving through flames on both sides because they got caught that far behind the power curve. So, I mean, and it's not saying they did something wrong because if you live, a lot of people, and that's kind of where the gist I got was a lot of people there are, well, the government's going to take care of us. They're going to sound an alarm. They're going to let us know it's time to leave. And a lot of people just got ambushed by the fire because nobody, I did finally see in Santa Monica, I made 2 attempts to get back to the Airbnb. We can talk about that. That was very interesting through the lockdown areas. But it was not until I got to Santa Monica 2 days after the initial fire where they were going on the loudspeakers like you see in movies, attention citizens, an evacuation ordered from this area. And the
2 days later.
This was Santa Monica, so this was considerably south of Pacific Palisades, and they were afraid that it was going to breach. And to the best of my knowledge, it did not. It did not breach.
Okay, well that's understandable. If they were still concerned it was going to breach, that they were sounding the alarm, then I get that. I get that.
Yeah,
But
and I'll be honest, I wasn't there to hear a tornado siren go off. We were long gone, and
do they even have tornado sirens in that area? I
they
know in
have
the
I would
Midwest
imagine
we do.
you have to have a public, not like a air raid sirens. You have to have something like that. I don't know if
I'd
it's
like
a
to think they
tornado
do,
siren.
but I mean, I've
Yeah,
only ever lived in the Midwest, and we have tornado sirens everywhere because we get tornadoes everywhere.
right.
We don't have them down here, and we get tornadoes.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
as an aside, I did on the day that one of the days I was going back. I made 2 attempts to get back into the area, and that was I don't know if you saw the story that some knucklehead accidentally sent an evacuation order via text to the entire city, and then about 15 minutes later said, "Oops, our bad. It was only for this area." So yeah, that there was a little bit more panic caused by government mismanagement days after the initial event.
Interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know where we were going with it, but yeah, it was that the electric vehicle thing was. It's interesting to see a society that is really big into it. That's cool, but when it came down to an emergency, not what I would have wanted as my primary.
So we've kind of talked through just a couple of things that I'm picking out of my brain bag that I want to kind of put up for the listeners. But like, we talked about how it seemed like this event caught a lot of people flat-footed, which, to be fair, I think all three of us would agree that like probably 80% of the population would be caught flat-footed because their head is so far up their behinds or in their iPhones that, a meteor strike would barely raise an eyebrow. But you mentioned the Citizen app. Like, what other, if we have to talk about constructive criticism takeaways, what would you say is the constructive criticism for a person who lives in a place where a wildfire is possibly going to brew? Like things that you should be thinking about today, so that if the moment comes, you're a little bit more prepared for it than your neighbor calling you and say, "Hey, dude, look out your front window."
No, great question. And I see Raggle Fraggle say, begs the question, if you have 10 minutes to leave, what are you grabbing? And that'll come down to lessons learned from me personally. Um, the biggest thing, and like I mentioned, I spent days before working on the evacuation plan, and it was not tailored for wildfire. It was tailored for getting our clients out of the residence, out of the area, north, south, east, not west, because that's the ocean, but north, south, and east. Frankly, though, there was I did do a maritime option. It was on a tertiary level, but the planning that I did there, and this is that you don't have to be doing the work that I'm doing, knowing your area, and that was tough for me because I felt like a stranger in a strange land out there. I was wearing blue jeans, which pretty much they were like, "You don't belong here because you're wearing." I was wearing nice blue jeans, but I didn't have rhinestones and shit. I don't belong there.
Birkenstocks and board shorts, man. You got to blend in.
I can tell you this: green
Birkenstocks and board
Lambos
shorts.
and blue jean everything is in. Green Lambos and blue jeans everything. I saw that the dude was rocking it. I mean, I wasn't going to make fun of him because he was driving a green Lambo. But so yeah, having a plan, and it's something that my wife and I have the same kind of thought. We're away from home. We can't go home. Where do we rally?
Mhm.
So we're separate. We're away from home. We know we can't go home. What's the rally point? And my wife and I have that. And it's actually, I'm glad we're talking about it because it's been a while. I know what it is, but we need to update and rehash it. We have a rally point where we think we can go home. We get near home and we can't go home. What is a nearby rally point? So we have our nearby
Sure.
rally point, and then we have our we are at home. Where are we going? So these are things that we've talked about. We have different bags that are set up for different things, and they gather. We had to buy a little bit of extra underwear and socks and extra toiletries, and other than maybe an annual inspection and inventory to blow the dust off and make sure that I haven't eaten too much Chinese food and can't fit in my underwear, or got tapeworm and can't fit into my pants. Whatever it is, I'm going to update as needed. So we've got that stuff. But the big thing for lessons learned here was wherever you are, try to have a primary, secondary, and tertiary plan of getting out.
Mhm.
So I'll give you an example. I can't go into too specifics, but for us, for a protective detail, a primary is we're going to pull a vehicle right outside where the clients are at, and we're going to do a vehicle evac.
Sure.
Luckily for this day, I got to do a primary, which is the easiest. There was no obstruction. Now, why secondary and tertiary are so important is this road that my client's residence was on is a 2-lane road, but because of the driveways that are about 5 inches long, nobody can park in their driveways because they will block the sidewalk and then they will get a ticket from the city. So imagine the most expensive cars in the world all parked on the road at night. I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. Excuse me, that's my wife. The old driveway alarm going off. She's coming in from picking up the farmer stuff. So that road, though, at night, once everybody was done with work or Pilates or whatever it was a 1-lane road. And it was one of those where you would see somebody coming. If they were already kind of in, you'd kind of do what you could to get out of their way, and they would maybe wave at you with the latte and the cell phone in their hand. I don't know how they were driving, but that's how they're doing it. It was 1-lane road. And so luckily that day, I had a big SUV. I had the size, and it was this is the right of way. I came right down the road. I, for the most part, nearly pulled up into the yard. Yard doesn't matter anymore. And then that's when the evacuation started. But I was able to. And then I was able to nose forward, get out. And because of my pre-planning, I was able to navigate very windy neighborhoods down to the Pacific Coast Highway, which I was very happy that we were doing it so early, because the Pacific Coast Highway, for anyone that paid attention, turned into gridlock. It's 4 lanes, north and south, going along the coast. It got bogged down, and luckily I hit what I would consider normal traffic going south, and carried on, and that was no big deal. Our secondary plan was a on foot evacuation to another location to meet up with a vehicle. That was our secondary. So the problem with this, and it's far easier in Michigan or any other state that doesn't have walled in yards, is I had to go acquire bolt cutters at the local hardware store. The reason being is, if we couldn't go out the front door, we had to go out the back door. Well, the back door goes to a yard that's got a big wrought iron fence in it, and it's got a padlock that goes into the neighbor's yard, and then their front fence probably has a padlock on it. And so in that emergency situation where I'm going to have to apologize and risk the trespassing charge. I might need to cut that lock, get them through, cut that lock, get to a main street, get to our other location, and meet up with a vehicle. Knowing full well I'm going to have to ask for permission, and I'm going to have to pay some monetary fines, but life is more important than that. Luckily, we did not have to do it. And then you get into tertiary. Tertiary is start thinking very creative. And luckily, we didn't have to do that. So I already had, we had researched and talked to helicopter companies. We had looked for what doesn't have high tension lines, what are grassy fields nearby, where we can shove people onto helicopters and then wave goodbye because we know what the helicopter can carry and it's not us. So then we had our plan for vehicle or on foot evacuation and a link up point. Luckily that didn't come to it. I had researched and actually walked miles. If the secondary plan, we were not able to do a standard secondary plan, I had actually identified a hiking path that was wide enough for an SUV. And it was the gate that was blocking that hiking path was only a padlock and a swinging gate. And I had taken pictures of it, saw what the lock was. I knew my SUV could ram that gate, and it would allow me to get all the way down the Pacific Coast Highway without going through a single traffic light. It would just be a winding path all the way down. I drove all the way down to the other end, and lo and behold, it was just a padlock gate. There was nothing that would obstruct me from driving right on the Pacific Coast Highway. Yes, I would get in trouble for it. I would get a ticket for it. But at that point in time, the officer that pulled me over would probably be like, I got bigger things to deal with. Don't do that again. And I'd be like, I'm just going to get them out of here if you don't mind. Yeah. So thinking creatively, luckily didn't have to do it. I don't want to do it. But that is the level of thought. It was 4+ days of planning, lots of photos, lots of coordinating with my operations center to make sure that if I was not in the seat, that my plan that I put together, they could look at a plan and go, all right, Trek built this. I know exactly what I need to do. We can all do that. You don't have to be a security professional. We can all have something like that.
Well, but
go ahead.
But the thing of it is that, like, the average person would have huge advantages you didn't have simply for the fact that they would know their local area. They would likely, I'm going to use the word should and would likely quite a few times, but just bear with me for a second. But like they should know the local area. They should know the routes to get away from whatever could be causing them harm. Like they should know the lay of the land, which is all huge advantages you didn't have when you had to
Right.
cook up all these plans.
I had to do a lot of grunt work, and it was good though because, like I said, the day of the evacuation, the windy neighborhood down the Pacific Coast Highway, there's lots of roads and turns. I had done that. In the protective detail world, there's a lot of boredom, and the joke is it's 99% boredom, 1% sheer terror. January 7th, we got the 1% sheer terror, but it was the I can sit in this parking lot and wait for my client to call me to do something or whatever it is, or I can go scout, I can go time lights, I can go drive, and luckily, I basically knew that there was a gas station down there. There was coffee there, and I'd say, all right, well, let's go do the route, get a coffee, come on back, and then later on, I would do a different route. And because of it, dealing with everything that was going on, I didn't have to look at a map app, even though I had used that. Google and Apple had a tablet that was up on the window a lot of the time, and I'd be plotting routes. I didn't have to look at the app map. I knew once I got to Pacific Coast Highway, go south. Like just at that point in time, pull over to the side of the road once there's no danger, and I can start to look at the map again. But I was really proud of the preparedness that went into that just paid off in dividends. Hindsight, this is important. We could have stayed longer. Knowing what we know, we had probably an hour before all hell broke loose and the normal public started to also freak out because the fire was burning closer. Am I upset about it for personal gear? Yeah. I was at the Airbnb when I got the call. A pair of night vision went up. One of my blasters is now a molten pile of hollow sun, hollow points, and SIG frame. A bunch of Pelican cases, a taser, 75% of my clothes, new Solomon shoes that I just bought. Now, granted, I wouldn't have grabbed all of that stuff, but if you had told me this is what was going to happen, I definitely would have grabbed a couple things and shoved them in the bag. But I feel bad for the clients and what they lost. Because hindsight 2020. If I could go back to the future and go, hey, head inside. We have 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Grab, as you mentioned, anything that you can carry of value. Grab clothing, sentimental items. We've got time. 15 minutes, but we didn't know. And so, on that flip side, of the stuff that I did lose, there was stuff that I had with me that always went with me. Period. Dot. The end. And that's the go bag. Right. I did post a picture of it on social media of what I had, and they don't make it anymore. And if Carrie Davis from Dark Angel Medical is listening, I love you, Carrie. Make it again. I know it felt very well, but you can make one of these. It was the St. Michael's backpack from Dark Angel, and it looks like a nondescript gray backpack. On the bottom side, it has a tearaway med kit, trauma kit. You pull a tab, the bottom flaps down. So that was actually loaded up, normal Dark Angel kit, but 3 extra tourniquets, cat tourniquets. And also a small folding razor blade and 2 emergency blankets, the Mylar blankets. Those are actually packed in there. On top of that, I had my full Dark Angel Medical Dark that you'd see me wearing as an instructor that I can clip to a belt. That has a trauma kit, a boo-boo kit, a junctional tourniquet. It's going to be a junctional. It's a lacrosse ball that's been cut in half to put pressure on a junctional injury. Flashlight was on me, but I had a spare battery-powered ProTech 2L because the one that I had on me was rechargeable. Had a battery-operated one with a Theorem cell vault with 3 spare CR123s. 5-hour energy. Had some caffeine. I drink caffeine. The last thing that you want to do is be on. I go from board to now I'm on duty for 72 hours. I cannot go get a bang at the grocery store because I have these people that I'm responsible for, and now I'm starting to get a caffeine headache, or I'm starting to get tired. So I always keep one of those in there. One of the things I picked up, I don't know the name of it. I thought they were really cool because we have charging cables in all the vehicles and whatnot. Those are always in the vehicles, but I have their disposable power. They look like a credit card, and they have a little wire you pull out, and they've got an adapter for Androids or
Oh,
and they'll recharge that phone like 5 times, then you just throw it out. So I carry 2
I've
of
not
those.
heard of that.
They're really neat. They're cheap. They're like $3-4 a pop. You get them in a 5-pack. I gave a couple to Al.
Interesting.
I'll try to get those to you. Maybe next show you can hold them up. They're really neat.
Yeah, let us know. I will definitely order some of those to try out. You know, Jeff brings up a good point here. This is why he has an ammo can of digitized info, cache, and various other important things. Excellent idea.
Yep.
You know, we live in a digital age. Cloud storage is cheap to free, people. Yes, encrypt your personal data, but you can store it on the cloud as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that one of our good friends, Stewart, his go bag, like he has the not coming home bag, and then he has a go bag, and the go bag is things I'm probably gonna need for a couple of days. The not coming home bag is the title to his home, the title to his vehicles, all of his insurance paperwork, cash, credit cards, checkbook. It is, I grab this bag, my wife and I get in the car, we're going to live in a hotel until insurance paperwork clears. Like this is the house is about to burn to the ground. Goodbye. We're never coming back. And everything inside of it is going to be a write-off. And it's, to me, it's just, it is in a very dispassionate way, stripping down all of your worldly possessions to what are the 5 things I don't want to have to do without. And if you want to go that route of like, I have an ammo can with like stuff I don't want to lose and cash and things like that, or it's just the paperwork to like hard reset my life if I have to. To me, like I always go back to this idea of, because like we've talked about this on the show before, of like if you had 5 minutes to evacuate, if you had half an hour, if you had an hour, and like when you get down to that 5-minute mark, I think we all say pretty much the same things. It's like, I have a box of paperwork. I'm taking my wife. We're taking spouses, loved ones, pets, and paperwork. Everything else can stay.
Yep.
Grab a gun and a couple of spare magazines if you have the time. But like everything can be replaced at the end of the day.
Yeah, 64 gigabytes of storage.
Yep.
And this is the cheap, shitty one. 64 gigabytes of storage. You know how much personal data you can store on this in an encrypted file?
Lots of.
You carry it with you every day anyway. Why not have some of that data with you in a highly encrypted file with a password that's stored up here that you can get to because you're already going to have it?
Yeah, it's interesting to say. I found the photo, so I'm just looking at it because it's actually kind of neat just to look, and I laid it all out once we finally got to our final evacuation point, and kind of took a couple deep breaths. Ham radio, I had outfitted us with 2 Baofeng UV5Rs. I brought those personally. They were already programmed, FRS, GMRS, and then had those as redundant comms. We ended up not using them, but both my partner and I had them. I had them with little stubby antennas so we could wear them under a dress shirt. A reflective belt seems silly, but in a low light environment, if I needed to signal somebody, I got a bright high vis orange reflective belt. Medical KT tape. You never know when you might need to either wrap an injury or just to fix something quickly to something else. I could wrap something to something, so I keep a spool of that. Still in the bag, I've got one of those cooling towels.
Oh yeah.
So if I had for me, put it around if I'm got heat going on or whatever, I could use it. I could wrap it around. A lot of people were making makeshift masks with the smoke. Wallet, of course, was on my body. Flashlight, pocket knife, pen, which I always have with me. Very interesting. This was pretty funny. Got to the hotel, was starting to, hey, one day I'm going to get to go home. Oh shit, my car keys were in the Airbnb.
Oh.
And luckily, and this is pretty funny because my vehicle was sitting at Detroit DTW, and it's like that was my keys, and now my house is 3 hours away. Luckily, my brain, and this is unbeknownst to me, stowed those keys in my go bag. I do not.
Good brain.
And there was a social media poster. I'm holding them up, and I'm like doing the dance, like My brain said, don't put those in your luggage. Put those with you, even though you don't have your car, because they're of value. And so, headlamp. I did have a headlamp with me,
Nice.
rechargeable. Use the same charging cable as an Android. So,
Nice.
yeah, just those, and then some Scooby snacks. Just some
Yeah.
food in case I wasn't going to be able to eat. But that was the bag that was with me. Now, granted, that's not the same bag that rolls with me here. It is the same bag. Believe me,
Different contents.
I had to take a lot of things out from my Michigan bag to fly
Sure.
to California.
Yeah.
And there were a couple other things.
California legal.
There's a couple other things in the bag in California that are just not appearing in this podcast.
Mhm.
But those, yeah, I mean, that was what was with me the entire time, and I had everything I needed. It's not everything I wanted, but
Right.
I wasn't hurting, and I could continue to do my job, which was very important.
You know, that's one thing I think a lot of people don't keep with them on the go anymore is the Scooby snacks, like you call it. I keep a couple of Cliff Bar granola bars in my truck because each one of those is 250 or so calories. 2 of those is a quarter of what you need for a day to keep a grown man on his feet. I mean, nothing makes anybody, hell, nobody functions well when they're hungry. Their brain doesn't work right. They're irritable. Mainstay rations are a fantastic one.
Since you brought it up, and we'll talk about this once we wrap, but I'm packing my bag to go back into the office on Monday. And on top of a blog, getting a few other things, I just chucked one of these in there because it's not like I think I'm going to starve while I'm at work. But let's just say I've been in some weird situations where I was stuck out. I expected to leave work at like 3:00, and I was out there till almost 9:00 at night because we had a bomb. We had a bomb threat. They had to lock the building down. Couldn't let anybody near it to get their vehicles. I've had a very interesting career. Let's leave it.
You
at that.
have.
But the point
the worst
is,
thing I get is a tool gets crashed, and it's, oh my God, this has to be fixed before 5 a.m. tomorrow.
no, but that's why I have mainstay rations in my bag right next to the laptop, because when I get hungry, I get grumpy.
Well, I'm glad you just said that. One thing I did add to my bag that's currently in my bag, and if I go to a place like California again, is a life straw.
That's a good idea.
I normally have a water bottle with me, and I keep it topped off. In California, don't go asking for a plastic bottle of water. They like straws and everything. Like they'll lose their mind.
They don't have them?
Oh, they do, but it's you like ask for a straw or a plastic bag. First of all, you have to buy all your bags. Like it's all that green stuff, right? But it's a $19 filters out, 99.99%, and it takes up very little space. I used to have one that would screw onto a water bottle little filter, but I just decided this thing, it's unobtuse. You can stick it in any water source. You can get some water, and I figured that would just be good. Luckily, we did not have a problem getting.
Try that thing out, though. If it's the life straw I'm thinking of, try that thing out when you're pretty thirsty, and let me know if it doesn't make your dehydration headache worse.
Okay. Okay.
Because they're actually, the draw of actually pulling water through that thing is a lot more than people realize. I tried them out a couple of times, and honestly, it was such a pain that I went to the Sawyer squeeze. You roll up a little bag around this filter. It's about the same size as a life straw. You fill the water in the dirty bag. You twist this thing on and you squeeze it out into your bottle, and you're good to go.
Nice. Okay, I'll look into that.
You can fill cooking containers. Try it out. I just, I see a lot of people with these life straws, and they never really try them. And are they better than nothing? Absolutely. I would never shit on them because they serve their purpose. But
they take a lot of
better. They take more effort than like a gravity-fed Sawyer or an inline Sawyer to a water bladder or something. Try it out. See what you get.
I've got 2 that I've never taken out of the plastic because they are backups to a Catadine Vario.
Yeah.
Which lives in my hiking pack because
Catadine pump filters are phenomenal.
And understand that something like a Catadine is like 8 degrees of overkill for a single person.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But I never go anywhere without my wife and daughter. So I'm expecting to have to filter water for 3 people with it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I said, damn, life straws. Because if I got to suck water for 3 people out, I'm just going to friggin', chance the puddle.
Well, yeah, that is one thing I don't like about the life straws, and is that you can't cook with it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah,
For the
it's
situation that I was
not
looking
to
for.
crap on them, but
No, and it would not be my go-to here at the
for
homestead.
sure.
We have we've got a Berkey all the way down to
Yep.
also UV tablets, depending on, and they're
Nice.
all stored for emergency. But a Berkey is the normal thing that we use. But yeah, just for if I have ounces as pounds, and I've got this bag that
Yeah.
I'm going to pump around, and I have to hump it 450 yards down the dam, or excuse me, 450 feet. I think I said yards last time. 450 feet down the road to get to my SUV, and I've already got all this other stuff. Just have the off chance. Heck, and this was shared by my boss to be able to hand a life straw to a client.
Yeah, that's an
Uh,
easy to
and
use.
and where I'm going with that is he carries Tide pens with him, and it's the most ingenious thing. He said that one day he had a client spill something,
Oh,
and they were going
sure.
into, and he handed it, and it became like the best friend of the client because they could get it off their suit before going into a very important thing. So it's not just me. It might be they have a kid that's freaking out because they need water. The water's
Right.
not safe to drink. Gives them something to do, and it also could, of course, be for me if I need it to get water. But yeah, I'm going to look into it. I've never used one, and now you're gonna make me open the seal on that. But I got a couple of them, so I'll give it a
Always
shot.
test your gear
Yeah,
truck. Always
absolutely.
test it.
Yep.
But you're right though with that in your line of work now with the executive protection that you're doing, you do need to kind of think a little bit differently than what's the most user-friendly thing for me
Right.
to what can I hand to anyone?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
Try to
you're
keep it very simple. Don't try to overcomplicate it.
Absolutely.
well that, and I feel like in executive protection, you're almost more in the situation like a lot of us fall into in the preparedness world, where it's like most of us are willing to tolerate pretty austere conditions because it sucks, but it sucks. Who cares? You know what I'm saying? Especially for a lot of us that were in the military or have substantial hiking or camping experience. Most of us, our suck is not the same as normal people suck.
Sure.
But I have a wife and a daughter, and their definition of suck is not the same as my definition of suck. So a lot of
Quote
times,
Jocko Willink type 2 fun.
yes. But the
Yeah.
thing of it is that in your line of work, because you're dealing with clients, you're in kind of the same boat I'm in with my wife and daughter, and a lot of people are, where it's like I do certain things not because I can't deal with the suck, but to make it suck less for them because they're now the priority.
Oh yeah.
Like that's your client. These are my clients.
No, absolutely. And Judd, you saw a lot of people. As I said, we were early to the bug out, which is great. But as we got to our final evacuation point, waiting decisions on the next steps, people started to filter in to where we were at that had also fled. And they went from this is my normal, things don't suck, to this really sucks. And I've never put my brain in a sucky situation. And now I'm having to figure it out. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I think, and it doesn't matter what you make, how wealthy you were, how not wealthy you were. If you lost something, I'm sorry, especially if you lost a loved one, a loved one being a pet. I'm sorry, but there clearly is a culture in that specific area that is not hardship,
Yeah.
and a lot of people got a taste of it, and hopefully, just like when we talk about, there's not a lot. I never dealt with politics with MDFI with the students, but we know kind of where people that go to a firearms class lean politically. But every now and then I would get somebody that came from the other side of the political spectrum. And when you'd ask them, what made you change? It was because they survived a very bad experience and realized that their viewpoints, it doesn't matter what they thought, it was what reality was. And I just hope that, you heard the stories of the ex-colonel that lived in Pacific Palisades with his son, and he was a strapping young dude. And instead of fleeing immediately, they rigged up a pump from a generator into their pool and put sprinklers and zip tied them all over their house, turned on the pump and fled, and that house was still standing. Those are people that their brain has gone to places so their body could do it. A lot of those people, they made it. Now their body did it. And they probably didn't like the outcome because they may have said, we could have done this, we could have done that. And I just hope that it changes a lot of people as they rebuild, and they become more prepared. And I think a lot of people got a wake-up call of no one is coming to save you. They cared more about DEI than putting out a fire. And voting has consequences. Elections have consequences. So even if you vote the way that it should have gone and it didn't go that way, now you know specifically you better take care of yourself. And that's,
Yep.
it doesn't matter. Our California, there's a lot of free thinking red-blooded Americans in California. The big cities control everything. So
That's where I'm at too, man. Illinois is the same way. Chicago overvotes the state.
Yeah.
that's it.
I mean,
And I mean, the problem is like, yeah, voting has consequences. Geography has consequences too.
damn straight.
Because, and it's a hard thing for me to say going down that road because, like,
you're just above sea level.
I was thinking in terms of like geographically where you live in relation to the politics of that area.
Well,
But thanks,
I was
Nick.
thinking hurricane flooding, bud.
Oh, that's the spice of life down here. But no, I mean, thinking about it realistically, like I know people who live, I say behind enemy lines in places where the prevailing political opinion does not lend itself towards people being free to take care of themselves. Let's state it like that because that's about as polite as I can be. And if you live there, you might vote for your freedom, but other people vote against it. So continuing to live there carries consequences that you get to eat the same shit sandwich everybody else does. But I totally understand because I know people. I used to know a couple of people that lived in California, and despite how much they detested the gun laws out there, they stayed because their family was there, their whole life was there, their history was there, and they were still fighting to change things. So I see it from both sides. But at the end of the day, I just say that if the place you live places more value on how many like black, transgender, lesbian firefighters they have, rather than how many people can put out a fire, that might be an opportunity to think about: is this the situation I want to be in when things go bad? Not if, when.
And I think this is great as we're at the hour 15-minute mark. One thing I think that I should talk about is the 2 attempts to get back into the area.
Yes.
Because there's some very valuable lessons here for all of us that maybe get out of a bad situation, but we had to leave everything that we had. The fires in Maui, the wildfires, it's well known now that the people that were turned away at police checkpoints and actually were turned away and went back, they died. The people that breached and drove around and just yelled America and gunned it past, they lived. I saw very similar things. Luckily, not to the loss of life. Luckily, very few people lost their lives compared to the amount of area that was burned. Like I said, we evacuated. There was no checkpoints up or anything like that. We got out early enough. But my big concern was I did have a firearm in the Airbnb. Yes, any California attorneys, it's a California legal gun. I basically took my SIG, the 365, put the small frame, 10-round magazines, and it was in the house. So this particular blaster was in the house. It was loaded. It was secured in the house. It was the home defense gun, but it was in the house when the place went down and burned. And of course, I had some other very expensive equipment. So once we got the clients to safety, I got the go-ahead with them being covered to make attempts to get back in. And I can tell you that I used everything possible to do it by the book. I did not attempt any subterfuge because I would have done a lot more if I had been just a normal Joe citizen. But because of my duties, if I get hemmed up, I affect the clients. And so I say that it would have gone definitely different. And I'll tell you why. But I tried everything by the book. I did learn one very important lesson. If you're going to ask LAPD to kind of think outside the box and think for themselves, never approach someone that looks like they're right out of the academy, and never approach somebody that looks like they've been a corporal for 40 years because they don't like you and they don't like their life. So the day one, I attempted vehicle access to the Pacific Palisades, and there were checkpoints everywhere. I attempted to go on foot because of the private property, the gates, which I was not going to violate private property law. I couldn't get in. I did what I could. I talked to LAPD fresh out of the academy, and this young lady she looked like $1 million in that uniform as far as like it was all specced out exactly what it was supposed to be. And she just said, "Sir," a whole bunch. And she knew she was going to get yelled at if she said anything. The next one I
Sure.
talked to, he was the corporal, been there 40 years. I said, brother, can I talk to you for a second? He goes, no, sir, you may not. The funny part was he talked to me for about 5 minutes after he said that, which was pretty damn funny. Those were the first two ones I came to. My second attempt, I came very close to getting in. I actually rolled up to two dudes that looked like normal guys. I pulled up to them and I said, listen, man, I'm going to throw some stuff at you. I probably know your answer, but just hear me out and then I'll take your answer. And he goes, you're probably not going to like my answer. I said, well, I threw everything. Hey, I'm a vet. I am a private investigator. Here are my credentials. I have a flight out tomorrow. Here is my boarding pass. Here is the key to the residence. Here's the rental agreement to the residence. I have an unsecured yet secured firearm. I am just trying to get proof of life to make sure that it is destroyed before I leave. If you guys will roll by the residence and tell me it's a smoldering crater, I'm good. You let me in, I'm gonna roll by. Luckily, he gave me some hints and was able to get me on an escort list. And then they canceled the escort because the winds picked back up and the fire started to move back in. So I came very close. I can tell you that a couple days later, my relief waited 14 hours in line and finally made it in.
Jeez.
14 hours under an escort, and then he left his escort, and they didn't care. So the footage, if you've seen on my social media of our smoldering crater of an Airbnb, that was taken by my relief agent that did that. And thank God, I mean, he had the patience of Job because I just could not have waited that long.
No.
But the interesting thing was, and where I'm going with this is, I made the choice. If I had my nods and it was dark and I am on the hook for either valuables or a loved one's medicine or a firearm that I'm going to be held accountable to. And I will tell you, the LAPD dude that I talked to said, hey, brother, if the house is standing, we'll take it into custody. We'll mail it back to an FFL in Michigan. Believe me. He's like, all right, we ain't going to hem you up over it. We get it. The whole place is burned down. So that was really cool. That did put me at ease. The place burned down. It's gone. So that's good.
Yeah.
That's good to know. But the interesting thing was, if you watch the news, guess who was in the secure area? Criminals. All over the place.
Of course they were.
Looting the place. So this goes down to, and I guess the last thing that I kind of want to end on is, I am, of course, not saying I'm going to go like put a suppressed 22 and anyone who gets it. No, my God, no. But you may need to buckle the status quo to do what's right for you and your family. And I'm not talking about hurting people, but you might need to walk across someone's yard. It's trespassing. You might need to break a lock, leave $100 bill if you do, to get out, to get your friends and family to safety. You might have to Baja through a school baseball field. You might need to breach that fence in the highway. I was thinking about it in a traffic jam the other day. That little fence right there, and you can see the other road. If all of a sudden an active shooter starts on that highway, you have four-wheel drive, go over that fence, destroy that fence, apologize later, pay the fine, pay the fee.
Fence, that corn, that soybeans.
Whatever you got to do. And so when you look at it, the criminal element, they were in there. They were breaching. Now, they weren't going to the checkpoints because the checkpoints had LAPD and they would turn around. They were going through the woods. They were going through people's yards. They were dressing up like firefighters. They were dressing up like work crews. The next time I go back, if I ever go back, I will be bringing a hard hat, reflective vest, and a clipboard.
Hey man, a clipboard has gotten me in many places. I only say
this. I walked past a gentleman who was leaving the secured area. I was on foot trying to get in, and I said to him, I said, "Hey, are they letting people in?" He goes, "They are if you're dressed like this." He was not a firefighter. He was not a construction worker. He was wearing a flag. He was a homeowner. I watched lots of homeowners in Santa Monica where they had blocked the roads off. The nearest part to Santa Monica that would get to Pacific Palisades, which was still a hell of a hump. I watched lots of very fit dudes with some very out of shape cops. Cops were like, "Nope, you can't go further," and they were like, jacket came off, and I mean, they just ran by and like, "Stop!" And they're just like middle finger in the air. Those were homeowners trying to get to their house because the fire hadn't taken the house yet. They were hearing the stories about the looting, and they had stuff that they wanted to get. The funny part was, once you're in there, as long as you weren't looting, you could walk out a checkpoint. You just couldn't get back in.
Oh,
so,
you can always leave an evacuation area. That's the nice thing.
Zone. So LAPD, thanks for the stories. The firefighters there, those stories about their hoses running dry are absolutely true. The fire hydrants in Pacific Palisades went dry because they had to turn them off for water pressure so they could fill the reservoirs as much as they could. All those people are studs. And by me telling you, hey, I might need to not obey your order. Well, you can arrest me, because if I'm going to do it, there's a reason why I'm saying I'm willing to risk it. I'm willing to risk it. And so one of a scenario, and I won't give away for an MDFI class, there is a force on force scenario that we do where in all of these scenarios, we put an exit sign above a door or something. And it says, once you accomplish the task I give you in the scenario, to leave the scenario, all you have to do is walk through a door marked exit.
Sure.
There is one scenario that I do where all hell breaks loose and people are running around and they're like, where's the exit? Well, there's a door that says employees only.
That's an exit.
And it takes people forever to open that door, and the next door in says exit. But we as trained society people say, no, it says employees only. I can't go in there. When hell breaks loose, that door is a door. If you were in a restaurant, of course we go in and out the front door. There is always a delivery door in the back of that kitchen. Is the chef going to yell at you and throw something at you? Yes. Don't worry, run right past them. Get your.
I've worked in restaurants. The chefs don't care that much.
Yeah, some will. Don't. If it's a properly trained CIA graduate, Culinary Institute of America, don't go in their kitchen. They'll throw knives.
Well, there's that.
But I mean, this is the stuff that the big takeaways from this was: be ready to buckle the status quo. If it's going to come down to your life of your loved ones, don't hurt somebody else. Of course, I mean, they're trying to hurt you. That's a different story.
Yeah, that's self-defense.
But I can run, if someone's trying to stop me, I can run right or left around them to get my family out of where I need to go. And I'll pay the ticket. They can say, we have your photo. We're going to arrest you. Yes, you're going to arrest me.
Fantastic.
And so that's kind of the big takeaway. And it drove me crazy knowing that I had a professional responsibility. I had a personal responsibility with the firearm. And luckily the LAPD, the cool guy that I talked to, and he's like, brother, we're going to get you taken care of, man. You're good. If we find it, we'll unload it. We'll put it in a box. We've done this many times to people that whatever the situation was. And so that's good. You hear the horror stories about California and they're going to arrest you. There are good people out there. But if I had been on my own and didn't have that professional responsibility and they're just telling me, sorry, you're just going to have to find out if that house is still standing. And I know in my heart, I'm only going in there to look for the house and secure that weapon. I probably would have done it because some child finding that gun to me in a burnt out wreckage where the house half burned down to me would have been that. But finding out luckily that the house burned down to the ground before I left the area, that was all I needed to make myself feel good. But if it was my loved ones, it just ups. I mean, I'm getting them out. I'm getting them out one way or another. So yeah, it was a very interesting time. It was interesting to be in a place where the whole world is watching what's going on, and the news reporters are literally like right where you're having a breakfast burrito the day before, and it's like this place is gone now, and that's very wild. I didn't get the closure of seeing where our initial evacuation happened, which I think my brain it'd be very interesting to process what we fled from. But just turning around when we finally got to where we were going and looking back at Pacific Palisades, and now at a distance of over 25, 30 miles away, seeing that entire mountain on fire, I didn't worry. I was like, we did the right thing. And so that's that, if your gut's telling you it's time to go, and just be ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's the biggest takeaway from all of this is if you are in an area where you can have situations like this, whether it is flooding or fire or whatever, make sure that you can leave in a very short time period. 5 to 15 minutes, I think, is a reasonable time period.
Yeah. And I would say that in a situation like this, like, I agree with what Trek said earlier. Like, if you had a crystal ball and you knew, okay, we've got 15 minutes spare, but like unless one of y'all has a crystal ball, mine's in the shop right now. I would say to say your goal is to get as fast as possible is an understatement. Every 5 minutes faster you can leave is an advantage because it's 5 minutes more distance. It's 5 minutes before your neighbors and everybody else clogs the streets. It's 5 minutes before a tree falls across the road. Like every 5 minutes you can cut off of getting the hell out of your home and getting on the road is an advantage. So again, if you have a crystal ball, if you like to roll the dice, I would say, yeah, like in 15 minutes, grab your stuff, grab your teddy bear, grab your whoopee, grab the cash and the jewelry. But honestly, at the end of the day, like I go back to the idea that if I think the house isn't going to be standing when we get back, I'm grabbing human beings
Yep.
and
That was it.
And an ancient aggravating old cat, and we'll just disappear.
Yeah, and that's it. It's purely a hindsight, just knowing what you know
Sure.
afterwards. But there was not all the human beings we were responsible for were out of there. That there was no concern about the clothes, the gear, or anything else until you got to calm down and say, "Damn it, I just bought those shoes." That's it.
But that's a thing to be said for maybe in your line of work, Trek. I don't know. Is there like a renter's insurance, a work insurance that you guys can get to cover that stuff?
I would say I've already been
Perfect.
made whole. I've been made whole, so I'm good.
Well, there you go. That is basic preparedness 101. If there's insurance that you can buy for it and it's in your budget to do so, do it.
Yeah. And I do. And on that note, I feel so bad for, and I'll leave this. I have a family member that works for State Farm. And years now, 2 years at least, was talking to him about State Farm and other insurance companies in California. There was a lot of hate going out for State Farm. When you actually, if you've heard that, and if your blood is boiled because you've heard that insurance companies have screwed over people in California, I would suggest you do a little bit more research. It is incredible what the state of California did to make it where the company had no choice but to say, we can't take it on because we're going to suffer too great of losses. But what that state has done to its residents, where they could not afford insurance, they made insurance companies pull out. And then for those that don't know, because they made these companies pull out, they offered a California insurance from the government.
Which is not covering anything.
I can only imagine how bad it is. But they're saying that a good portion of those residents will never, ever, ever be able to rebuild because they don't have the coverage. And so
that's terrible.
If you can give, I'm skeptical of a lot of the stuff that popped up, but research charities, if you're interested, if you've got, I always I go for the Brian Terry Foundation because of the stuff with the Border Patrol. And we did just lose an agent recently that was murdered on the side of the road. But if you have $1, maybe 50 cents for the Brian Terry Foundation, find a good charity that could help those people out. Hey, it ain't just California, North Carolina with what's going on. There's and that's pretty sad too. We could go on for hours. The publicity that got, granted, being the greatest loss of property and damage, but we kind of forgot about, because of geographical location and politics, East Palestine and North Carolina. There's a lot of people out there that are in need. And maybe, just maybe, once Doge finally figures out how much money has been wasted by the federal government on transgender monkey surgeries in Nepal, we can get some of this money to Americans that actually need it.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna have you back on once Doge completely gets rewiring the government, so we can just go through the who's who of all the malfeasance and the waste and the programs that Musk and company found.
Yep.
Nic has abandoned us. I'm pretty sure either his wife or his dog demanded his attention.
That does happen. He did just shoot a BRB to us. But no, it's, interesting day. Just like I was in Kirkuk, Iraq in 2004 when it took a direct hit to the munitions storage area. And I still remember that day, still have dreams about that day. But it's amazing where if your brain's gone to places, you might be kind of like, wow, I can't believe that just happened. But your world doesn't crumble around you because you are prepared mentally and physically, not just physical fitness, but gear-wise, preparedness-wise. You'll make it through it. And so I look back on that going, man, I just sold MDFI. That was my first gig. I had been hired on a year before for this end with MDFI. And that was like, welcome to the party, pal. And so the good thing is, statistically, I should be okay for at least a little while. And I'm looking forward to the 99% boredom.
Hey, 99% boredom is a vast improvement over the excitement portion.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we do need to sew this up. We are 34 minutes past our traditional 1 hour, which isn't really a shock.
I
But
talk too much. I know it's me.
Hey,
dude,
man,
we could
it's
sit around.
all good things.
We could sit around for 2 more hours and talk about the adventure you just had.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But we do need to punt this one out the door. So, Trek, you still hang around MDFI despite not being the owner. One of these days, we're going to have to get a couple of your crew members on, kind of a
Yeah.
passing the torch.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
and then they can tell me all the skeletons you're hiding in your closet that you haven't told me, and Andrew
It's
won't
mutually
divulge
assured
either.
destruction. They got nukes. I got nukes. All good. All good. I'm
That
just a
is
little rocket man sitting over here going, make a move. No,
That is
we'll
the
get,
basis of all good friendships. Is each one has enough dirt to bury you under the jail forever.
no, absolutely. No, we'll get Tim, Derek, and Brandon. Then we've got the other guys that are on part of the cadre. And yeah, I'm very proud to still be now a instructor with the company, and I believe in what they're doing. And yeah, you cannot ask for better instructors and better shooters to help make people better than these guys. So they would be a great addition to the Matter of Facts podcast.
They, having taken a class from them, they are absolutely phenomenal instructors. Top tier.
Yep, I
Yeah.
agree.
And if they ever decide to open up a satellite location in Louisiana, then I'd be happy to patronize
These
them.
young
But,
fellas, they're traveling. You just got to get them. They'll come down to you. They love the whole.
Get a big
They
enough
don't
class
have
together,
all
Phil.
the, all the gray in their beard. They need a little bit more. So get them on the road. Make them come to you.
I mean, Mardi Gras is coming up.
There you go.
There you go.
Just saying. All right. Let's go ahead and punt this one out the door. Matter of Facts podcast is going out. Trek, thanks for joining us. Nick, thanks for the commentary. And Andrew, good luck on that Epstein gig you're working on.
It'll be
whatever it
fine.
was. It'll be fine. Good night, everybody.
Night.